So today we have the highly anticipated episode about DevOps, where we break down CI, CD, and the other CD. And our DevOps expert and Buckeye Nut friend, Steve Thomas, does his best to settle into the Michigan Wolverine-adorned Agile After Dark studios. It's a good one, folks, so listen in. This is Agile After Dark, the podcast that addresses topics, agile topics not talked about in the light of day. We do have in the studio, obviously, somebody who is a fan from Ohio. Is it Ohio State or just Ohio or the state? Or
it's the.
What is the?
It's the thing.
What's the thing?
Well, said without sarcasm, Brandon, yes, it is the Ohio State University.
Because there's another Ohio State that you're trying to distinguish yourself from?
Hell no.
But why is it the Ohio State as opposed to just Ohio State? Like Colorado State is just Colorado State.
Because it is the university.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, hey, we're here in the studios, as I mentioned. We've got our resident cat in the heartland. And I don't know if you want to introduce our friend here who is looking through some of our AV equipment boxes.
Yep, that's
Sassafras.
That is Sassafras, known as Sass or Sassy.
We've got a good episode, and one I think that is, I don't know if it's near and dear to my heart because really I hate the subject, but I found it very interesting because we've got a special guest with us today, Steve Thomas of SIQ. Steve's got a varied background doing a number of things. Steve, you want to give us a just quick background on where you're coming from and what you've done in the past?
Blank.
Or you don't have to if you don't want to. Okay, Steve knows a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
we'll just go from there.
This is what he did to Christy in the first
blank,
podcast,
yeah.
and she was like, "Oh, well, thanks for that."
Yeah.
This is the host. This is the guy I promoted to host.
Steve's the guy who has glasses and has a lot of experience, and he's going to hopefully say something interesting.
Right. So,
Is that a good intro, Steve?
Whatever you
He has
want.
By the way, have you ever noticed how charming his blue-green eyes are, Brandon? I mean, I never noticed that until just now. It's very...
Yeah, we're related because I have blue eyes as well.
Wow, okay.
So that's the you didn't hear
I've
this
never
whole
heard that
thing.
they were bluish green, but
I'm smitten right now.
Okay.
Can't even say.
Oh, yeah, no. So, yeah, my background is as a developer, first, and then spent a lot of time at AT&T Bell Labs, and working is different things in that role, all sorts of different work, but and then I've been an Agile coach for a number of years and gotten to hang around with a number of people who are working, doing really good things as far as transforming. So my background started off in development in robotics, actually, working and doing manufacturing control systems, which is where I did my development, and then all of the work that I did was internal embedded systems, and so the places where I started coaching in Agile were people who were doing fairly technical software, for embedded systems mostly.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
God, I feel so dumb, Brandon. Do we want to continue this? Because I don't know.
Okay, can we just talk about he got his graduate degree from Ohio State, but he got his undergraduate engineering degree from Carnegie Mellon.
I don't know if I can even keep up at this point.
Yeah. But speaking of Carnegie Mellon, because it's towards Pennsylvania, we have to kind of give props out to what we're drinking today. So where I went to college was in Boston, and I'm drinking a Samuel Adams Coffee Black Lager, which is just very tasty. But I think it's actually going to last the whole podcast because it's not something you want to drink too quickly.
Are they a sponsor, Brandon?
No,
we're
not
working
a
on
sponsor.
that.
We're
Okay.
working on that.
We're
We're working on that. I got some local ties.
All right. So Steve, how are you doing?
I've got a Two Brothers Domaine de Page. It's their French country ale, which is very tasty. In the heartland here, I've kind of fallen in love with that one.
Yep, we kind of had it left over from the last podcast, and Steve's a big fan. Actually, the reason I was drinking it last time because Steve recommended it.
And I'm just drinking bourbon as usual. So
boring.
This episode titled CI CD, You Think You're Better Than Me. Let's be honest. DevOps, that term is used at least 10 times a day, and I'm not sure anybody knows exactly what it means. And so today we're going to dive into challenging you, again, as the concept of Agile After Dark, on what concepts, constructs, and prejudices you have about CI, CD, and DevOps, and what we're going to talk about delving into that.
Yeah, and as we get into that, I think it's important to know that in a recent survey, 2016 Puppet survey, of about over 4,500 IT professionals, IT departments with a strong DevOps workflow deployed software 200 times more frequently than low-performing IT departments. So I think this is a really important topic, but it's, as Greg said, DevOps is seen as, you read that sort of stuff from the survey and you think, okay, it's important. But what is it really? And that's kind of what I think we want to get into at the beginning of this with you, Steve.
Well, and I'll tell you, Steve, in my experience, even at a startup, and we've made this comment before, it's easy for a startup to use Agile. Even in startups, nobody wants to do automated testing. The developers fight it. They don't want to do it because it's not creative. It's not the kind of work they want to do. And you suffer every time if you don't make the commitment to do it up front. And even in the last startup I was at, which is a security company, they still fought it, even though obviously, financial services industry, there are regulations that you have to do it. So let's bring it down to why I would like to start to know why DevOps really is important and why it's not just a chore or something somebody says needs to happen. Why, as a product person, why do I care about DevOps?
That's a good question, but I'm first going to backtrack and say, because we're talking about DevOps, but we're talking about it kind of in the same way that everyone out there, or at least 90 some percent, of the folks talk about it, which is you're thinking DevOps primarily in terms of test automation and whatever, and that's not it. So
wait, hold on. You're saying that DevOps isn't just CD and CI. There's more to it.
Oh, much more. So that's wow. That's the beginning, but you're not even at DevOps. So those are the foundations that you have to put it. So automated testing, sure, you need that in place in order to get to continuous integration. You need that in place to get to continuous delivery. You need that in place before you can think about continuous deployment. And then once now you're beginning to talk about DevOps, but as some of the folks that I hung around, who finally taught me, okay, what is this really? If you don't have ops in the equation, you're not talking DevOps. So until ops is in part of the mix, you're talking about something else. You're talking about continuous integration or something before that.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen is, or what I've heard at least, without being nearly the expert that you are in this, is that, kind of DevOps focuses more on the culture, where CI/CD focuses on the processes and tools necessary to help teams adapt to a culture of continuing everything.
Well, that's partially true. Certainly the DevOps folks, when they have done like some of their conferences, DevOps days and stuff like that, they have begun to recognize and they emphasize them the cultural aspects, because those guys, you think developers are geeks. The ops people, they're really geeks and they're into their tools. And so they'll be talking about, Puppet and Chef and Nexus and, the GitLabs and Jenkins and all of these tools. And they want to geek out on all of those tools. And they've had to rein themselves back to say, those in the leading that, to say, hey, it's more about the culture shift.
So, Steve, what I'm hearing you say, which I think is typical in any development scenario, it's not a battle about frameworks, languages. It's more of a cultural shift, is what you're saying, right? It's not about the tools. It's not about the frameworks. It's about a mind shift. Is that right? And is that why people like me who care about product more and delivery more should care about this?
Oh my gosh, the people who really care about product, and delivery, those are the people who are, once they understand it, they're fantastic fans of it, because it's all about how do I get the new product changes into my customers' hands faster, and with higher quality and better, which is a big thing we'll get into. It's like, here's everyone's thinking, oh, wait a minute, if I release faster, I'm going to deliver crap out there. But no, it's about getting it into your customers' hands faster, getting the feedback from your customers in a much faster way. So that's But in order to do that, there is a huge aspect of tooling, as well as the organizational structure about how do we get all of these, my dev people and my ops people working together.
And so let me just say this. So in order to be agile, and let's put that into quotes, right?
This is a visual podcast.
There's a
Yeah,
that's
right.
why I made sure I mentioned that. You really can't be agile unless you are incrementally delivering, and therefore this is really a requirement if you really want to call yourself agile and not just, there's teams that are doing sprints every 2 weeks. This is a key component of that, and I'm sure, Brennan, we're going to go into that more in depth, but I think that's a critical piece because this is a burden. Nobody wants to do it.
Right.
Nobody understands how important it is, but we need to explore why that's important.
Yeah, and I think would be a good step towards that to kind of echo what Steve's saying is kind of taking a step back from the DevOps thing, because that is just a behemoth that we will get through this podcast. But I wonder, in terms of kind of taking us through the steps of CI,
Right.
CD, and then thinking in terms of people like Greg, the annoying product people, where they're saying, where am I getting value, and kind of, whether it's speaking to canary testing or
How much does it cost?
blue-green deployment, things like that. But is it really the cost versus the
It's a
value?
cost.
It is a cost, but also the value in terms of getting where you need to
You
be.
say
So-
quality. I don't even know what that means. So what? The developers are supposed to do their job. Why do I care? I'm assuming if you signed up for this amount of work and I'm paying for it, I assume that you're giving me quality. So why do I care about all this?
You're going to care about it if you want fast feedback. If you want to be able to know, all right, is this a... So if you're a real product person and you're saying, all right, I'm talking to real customers,
challenge.
as opposed to... I mean, there's so many in large corporations, so many that are intermediates, and when the large company I was in, hey, it was we counted and it was 4 layers of people within the organization. So our developers, they could not even. It was 4 layers they had to get through to talk to someone from the customer side, and they weren't even the users of our equipment. So it was just, it was mind blowing. Anyway, a real product person. I got lost on my tangent.
No. Oh, Steve's rants.
Ooh, a new bit. We got a new bit.
We got Steve's rants.
So a real product person who's saying, hey, I'm in touch with the customer, they're going to want fast feedback of, oh, okay, we're going to change, we want to deploy this. Is that going to work or not? Is that going to be helpful in driving more sales, in being better for the customer? That you want to be able to put it in production in a limited fashion that's not going to do too much damage to your brand. Test it, validate it, get it out there, know whether it's causing damage, whether it's, whether you put out a new change and guess what, 20% of my transactions fail. Also, you're going to want to know that stuff, but you want to get the changes out soon so that you can beat your competition.
So let me put it. So I think I hear what you're saying, and again, from the crazy product person perspective,
Here comes Greg's rants.
you essentially, everybody agrees. Yes, you want to get product to market faster so you can get feedback, but you don't want to be getting feedback on defects. You want to get feedback on quality products so that you can essentially design or redesign or respond from a product perspective,
Right.
not just solving defects, right? Your customer shouldn't be your defect, team.
Customer as tester,
Yeah,
hey.
but I think a lot of people think that's it's like, oh well, devs just do their thing, they kick it over the wall, and the quality factor,
Right.
The quality is not testers. Quality, the team owns quality,
Right.
and DevOps is part of the quality, right? And so you want to make sure that when it does go to the customer, it's gone through enough rigorous quality control, let's call it, or quality assurance.
Yeah, you want to have a lot of testing.
so that you're getting good feedback, not just defects.
Yeah, and I think there's some of the advancement that I've heard of and kind of seen in the CI/CD and to a certain level of DevOps, which is, I mentioned earlier, kind of the canary testing,
Yeah.
right? Which is correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but as I understand it is you can release things to a very small
Absolutely.
population of your consumers and see
Early adopters.
early.
Right?
Well, it does whoever you want to target, right?
Right. It depends on how you're structuring it. You can release to. Let me just if I'm doing software as a service, I can release to a random selection of 1% of my population, and it might be if you're using my service, it might be one transaction of yours out of 3. If my software as a service is structured in a way that you're like, all right, if something goes wrong or whatever, hey, it'll just the system itself will recover or whatever. You can do that sort of canary testing. It could be you're selecting, okay, here's the population that I want to test with, or it could be a random selection. And that's the power of some of these tools in a real DevOps environment is they have the tooling to be able to select who do I want to test it.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to get that out there because I like Steve's rants better than Greg's rants. But I do want to take a step back, and because Greg and I were at one of the hotels in the Heartland where we were doing a project with Steve, and we had some free drinks flowing, and
Good
at
night,
the time,
by the way.
yeah, that was a good night. And Steve basically broke down the CI, CD, and CD.
CD, yeah.
Right? And if you could kind of take our listeners through, because we have different, I think, levels of listeners of the 7 people that listen to our podcast.
Okay.
And by the way, I do want to mention to the 3 people that have listened to this that this was a huge revelation for me as a product person. It really helped me understand how distinct those pieces are and how they fit. So I think it's really important for all parts of the business and or development delivery to understand how you broke this down. For me, it was very helpful. So
Now that you've been validated, do you mind kind of
sure.
taking us through as much as you can remember, since we did have
As much as I can
free
remember.
drinks
Right.
flowing?
Yes, that was a good night.
Yeah.
So, right. So, I remember one of your questions was, okay, what's the difference between CI and CD? And I said, well, which CD are you talking about? Because that's one of the first, I said continuous delivery or continuous deployment. And you're like, I don't know. Because what's the difference?
That was me. I said that. But
Yeah, a lot of makers flowing on there.
Right. So you need continuous integration, and that's the starting point. Okay. And when you mentioned earlier, agile teams, you're right. You cannot be a real agile team and not have some level of automated testing going on and continuous integration. And that's table stakes. That's just getting in the door, but you're not anywhere close to DevOps. That's just, all right, I can do, when I complete my code, I can, I check it in and it automatically builds it and runs it through some sanity testing, runs it through some unit testing. Now, once I develop my automated test suite to a sufficient level, then, taking it through, sanity testing and some of the basic unit testing and functional testing. And then I'm going to say, all right, let me go take the next step. I'm going to have a pipeline to run it through, say...
Wait, hold on. I'm like confused. So all this has become spaghetti. So all development teams want is automated testing, unit testing, automated testing. Why do they need more than that? I don't get it.
Well, I think Steve and I have worked together with some teams, and there's the testing pyramid.
Yeah,
So can you take
exactly.
us kind of through that? There's some people that may not understand what that is.
Well, and the things that are part of that testing pyramid, but vary. But yes, there's the whole notion of you're going to have to fill in what are the layers here.
Yeah, I can't remember, but basically it's the idea of
it's this V.
This is a
it's
very
V
informative podcast.
Yeah, V versus the actual pyramid, right?
Right.
So a lot of the teams, they kind of have the V,
Right.
where it's kind of like they're starting doing some of the
Yeah, that's right.
unit
Now I remember.
testing.
It's requirements and then design, and then so you're going down the curve to this V, and then the testing is going back up again.
Right.
So at the bottom of this, the bottom of this pyramid, okay, we're doing unit level testing, and then we're going to go up to some functional level testing, and then we're going to move from there up to integration. As the component that I've just completed, this whether it's a class or this component, whatever it is, as it integrates with all of the other pieces.
Yeah, and it just gets more complex
Right.
as it goes up. And so the more testing, it's more man hours, if you will, right?
Right.
To do the manual testing.
Well, is it manual testing or is it automated testing?
No, that's
That's
why you
the
refer
sad part is
Right.
that in many of the current organizations, many of those layers are manual testing. And when it's manual testing, the best you can do is hit a few test cases that in a microscopic segment of the population are selected on a scientific basis, but on the vast majority of organizations are selected based on here's what some quote expert tester thinks is the right thing to test. But
So let's point that out. Is that is then a failure in the design of DevOps, is that manual testing piece, because it costs a lot of money. They're probably just hired guns that don't know anything about what the intent is of the software. If I'm a product guy, I'm like,
all about
why
the
are
money.
you hiring those guys?
So many money.
Spending money when I could have experts writing automated tests and then hire good quality people to do
Right.
edge cases or outliers to really test what we would care about.
Right. You're exactly right, and that's where so many organizations get penny wise and pound really stupid, because they're thinking, all right, well, but my manual testers, I can hire stupid monkeys, pounding on a keyboard, much cheaper than I can hire someone because the skills to do automated testing, to both know my product, know the right test cases to build, and then automate those. I mean, that's an advanced software development skill.
So do you think that's an issue in the industry? Is that
Oh, yeah.
we don't think about quality as a part of the team owns quality as an overall strategy,
Right.
which is just we're going to hire a bunch of people that can do, again, click buttons, but it doesn't.
Well, we need to do it faster, so therefore we need more people to do the inverted
Right.
pyramid versus let's have the unit testing part at the bottom,
Right.
and then all of the things that we're doing above that is mostly automated.
Right. You want it to be mostly automated, and so there's different layers of it. There's the integration testing, then there's going to be system testing. Then, before you get to continuous deployment, you're also talking about my security testing. So there's, in many organizations, it will, after the team, and I'm going to go backwards a little bit. When you mentioned about these manual testers, that's actually fully opposed to Agile, because how can you have manual testers inside of a small Agile team? You just don't have enough staff for that. You would be, that's why they have those manual testers. They're a whole separate team, because that's what it takes with that many bodies, that many hands.
And we've talked about it, Steve, before, and the kind of experience we've had teams working together
gosh.
is the whole full slice.
Right.
Versus, okay, I'm doing this development work as a story, and then I'm going to pass it off to do the tester as a story, which makes sense when you have to do all of that manual testing on all of that work that you're doing as a developer. And if you're going to fit it into 2 weeks, 1 week, or as we've had experience even less than that, that's almost impossible. And that's the learning curve in terms of, and to your point, where having a higher level tester in terms of experience, I will say, with some of the stuff that Steve and I have worked in the past, is that if you work with a manual tester and have someone that's kind of like whether it's a tech coach or something like that, that's able to kind of show them some of the ways of automation, they get it.
Mm-hmm.
They absolutely get it. And they realize that they can be working on automation testing scripts, that your shell scripts or what have you, that they can be working on while people are working on the development work on the stories that they were a part of.
Right.
And they can get ahead of the game.
So what I'm hearing, I'm getting a little bit bored, just so we're clear.
He's like, how much does this cost?
So how much does it cost? But what I heard you say is an outsourced, which is probably going to be primarily what is going to happen if you're doing manual testing.
Right.
Let's just be honest about it.
Oh yeah, they're hiring cheap labor.
Right.
Yep.
And so they could care less about the product. They have no idea, no vision about what the product is. Our last podcast dealt with product roadmaps and how you have to have teams and individuals invested in the roadmap and understanding what they're doing. Manual testers have really no care, and there are certain. I think manual testing does have its place in certain circumstances.
Oh, it absolutely does.
But
yeah.
from a product perspective, you have to have people invested in understanding what the vision of that product is.
You have to have people sign up for Dumbledore's Army. Just another HP reference.
Oh my God, he's bringing back the whole Harry Potter thing. It never will end. But so I think maybe now might be time to take a break, and we might want to tell people how they get in touch with us if they have some interesting information, or questions, which I don't have in front of me. It's agileafterdark.com or something like that.
Is it really that hard?
I don't know.
It's feedback at agileafterdark.com.
Right.
Let me
That's
say that again.
Exactly right.
Let me say that again. Feedback at agileafterdark.com.
Yes, and we're gonna go tend to our resident cat in the studio, Sassy, and we'll be back after this. Seriously, Michigan. So you grew up in Ohio. Steve, you grew up in Ohio.
No.
No.
I grew up down in Tennessee. But
What?
Yeah.
So,
But he's from the heartland. I'll just leave it at that.
yes, I am from the heartland.
wait,
So
was the
he's-
Heartland extend to where you?
No.
I was born
He-
here,
Yeah.
here in the heartland,
Yeah.
but my parents migrated down to Tennessee.
Oh, the Heartland. So does the Heartland include Michigan and
No.
Ohio?
Yes.
Not Michigan.
No.
What's Michigan?
Uh,
Not the Heartland.
Let me see. A swamp.
Let's stay down south. Up north. Right.
It's the state up north.
State up north.
It's officially, known as the state up north, or that land, or that cesspool up north.
We are back. And during the break, I switched to the Sante Whiskey Toki. And we were talking with Steve about how large organizations can take a trial approach to DevOps.
So even in a larger organization, you could take a particular application that's, say, my front end user experience, and they could be doing DevOps on that, so that it's deploying, whether it's continuous deployment, and then I manually do a checkout and say, yeah, let's put it into production, or I'm going ahead and doing continuous delivery with load servers, and so that, all right, I released it to 10% or 5% of my population. I do a soak test to see if it stays live or not. So I can be doing that DevOps. So I've got my ops people paying attention to what's going on in my pipeline. I can do that with even in a large corporation with a small segmented product.
Okay, so let's just take a startup. Okay, so you got automated tests, which if
Right.
you can get the developers to sign up for that, which you have to, and they're
You have to,
starting
yeah.
to figure it out, but they still fight.
Well, and that's where the developer ego thing gets.
Yes.
It's like, hey, I want to develop new stuff. Not recognizing that, hey, the expertise that I need to do automated testing. I mean, frankly, I get so frustrated with developers because put on your big boy pants. I mean, if you're developing, you should also be doing test automation.
That's right.
It's one and the same. You can't release your code. If you're particularly in a small startup, hey, who else are you wanting to hire monkeys to do this?
I know. And by the way, I was just in a startup last year, a fairly successful startup, and they still didn't want to do automated testing. They just fight it all day long. So once they do the automated testing, the continuous integration, again, for us product people who don't understand the technical side of thing, is really just ensuring that those the pieces that are being built are working together. Is that right?
Right. I mean, I check in a piece of code and it automatically gets validated through an initial set of automated tests, which is an expanding, with a good team, that's a constantly expanding set of automated tests. And, you're going to get, some people are going to get, and a lot of large corporations get wound around the axle about, oh my gosh, I can't spend that many resources on testing. But any smart organization says, hey, buying more MIPS is cheap. Since I can constantly validate that any change that I put in place works.
And then deployment is really going to a production environment, right?
Production, right. So in order to get to continuous deployment, I need to take it through not just this local level team. Well, what the teams often think of, oh, they're doing their testing, which is unit testing and some integration testing. But when you talk to ops people, they're like, hell, you have only begun to scratch the surface of the type of testing I want to put in place before I will put your crappy product out on my production, set of systems
that's an
environments.
interesting
So the
point of
ops
view.
people, they bring in and say, all right, I want to do sanity testing, I want to do performance testing, I want to do interoperability testing, I want to do security testing, make sure you haven't introduced any more security loopholes into my network. So they add a whole different set of
Okay,
testing.
so interesting. I didn't pick up on that before. So the deployment and delivery people are gonna say, I don't trust these devs,
Oh, absolutely.
and they didn't think of everything, so we're gonna put it now through. So now we're talking about a whole other layer of costs.
Right. No, it's the cost you're already paying.
Right.
The challenge is that you've got, and that's where so much of the DevOps articles talk about this cultural mindset, because at the very foundation, the development organization is focused on how do I get change out there. I'm responsive to my product person. Put a new change out there. So they're driving for new change faster. My ops people though are rewarded. They're compensated on keep the system alive, keep the system freaking stable. Now, the stablest system means put up a big hand to the developers anytime they want to make a change, because anything the developers are going to do is going to cause disruption. So bringing this cultural aspect of it is bringing the trust between the ops people and the dev people, saying, hey, how do we come together and actually respond to the product people and say, hey, let's provide the most value for the company.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the questions that Greg and I talked about about you with, which is there's that fear of pushing the button.
Yeah.
And mistakes are going to go to production. Now, keep in mind that companies like Netflix can complete integration, testing, and delivery in a matter of 2 to 3 hours. And they've established a system that passes code from hand to hand without indecision and discussion. It's not 100% automated because that's basically almost impossible.
But they're small. They're doing small changes. If you're doing a big release at a financial services company, you're not going to have that flexibility. I mean, right? I mean, there are so many more gates you have to go through, from security to regulation, all that stuff. Is that right or not?
The regulation is a red herring.
Man, he's on fire.
Yeah.
There are so many things, but it has totally to do with batch size. So when my change is big, then it's got to go through all of these gates, and I'm not going to trust it. And it's like, but the reason that I have to go through all of those gates is only because it's a big set of changes. The companies that have learned to do this well have said, you know what? The secret sauce to this is just doing it in very small, tiny changes. So while you're saying, well, that's just because it's a tiny change, that's in fact the secret sauce. Make it a very small change and only deploy it. So when they're deploying it, these advanced companies, they have the software to be able to say, all right, I'm only going to deploy it to 5% of my customer base.
I don't know about you, Brandon, but I think Steve is dreamy.
Well, I mean, absolutely. And I think to the regulation thing, I'm going to pull out my nerd thing here, that the Government Accountability Office report and ITA dashboard data indicated that agencies spend approximately 70% of their IT budgets on operations of legacy infrastructure and maintenance of current systems and applications. So I think that goes to the point of the regulatory thing being kind of red herring. It's just like they're spending all this money, but it's just, and this is from a product person looking at Greg, is that why are we spending this money?
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, to be fair, for some products that are safety oriented, you're not going to deploy those in even a 5%. You're going to go through extra gates for that, and that's why there's a difference between continuous deployment, which is I'm deploying it out to a production server but not turning it on, and I'm taking it through some other testing before I say, yeah, let's go live with this, and a continuous delivery. So some companies can do continuous delivery where I'm putting it into live production, in an automated fashion. But many other companies are going to, all right, I can take it through all of these types of testing, put it into deployment. And there's a whole separate science of how do I deploy it to a production environment and not have it live. But that's where they want to be able to, those systems, get the same inputs that the live system is getting. We did this in telecom. In telecom, we need 5.9, 6.9 reliability. You don't put crappy software out there and expect because we've only got 6.9 reliability. We've only got, for any given piece of equipment, 6 minutes of downtime a year. That's not much. So you want a system that's going to be in production, that's receiving the same inputs from production, generating the outputs, but they're not real.
Right.
So that you can basically shadow.
So there's a
your
safeguard
production.
there.
Yeah.
Right. So
some systems are going to definitely do that.
So we've gone through deployment, delivery, and again, maybe delivery isn't best for all situations,
Right.
especially as it relates to, specific products. And now now are we at this weird line where we're not talking about a C word and we're going up to the D words?
We're
the
finally-
DevOps?
yes.
Are we finally a DevOps?
So
now?
it's not a P word, so we can get
Not
into
a P
it.
word. We're not continuous or anything like that. We're now at a dev.
Right. Once you've gotten to continuous deployment or continuous delivery, you've finally gotten to the place where you can introduce ops people, and that again, that's the critical piece. If you're talking DevOps, when you're talking to any one of these 90% of the people who say, oh yeah, we're doing DevOps, do you have ops involved? No, then you're not talking DevOps. Once you've got continuous deployment or continuous delivery, you can finally involve ops in the equation.
Do we like ops people? I like. I'm
Oh,
just
I
saying.
love ops people.
I just feel bad. I like
Most-
it sounds like money falling from the sky. Ops. What do they do? I don't know what they do. What do they do? Why do I care? Why should I love them?
Oh, you're right. They do get persecuted on the budget side. It's like, hey, new functionality. They keep your system alive and running. And so all the revenue that you're currently getting is because ops is keeping stuff alive and running. So if ops doesn't work, oh my God, everyone notices. When ops does work, nobody notices.
Okay, Steve just got red in the face about ops. Okay, so he feels obviously very passionate about the ops people, and he's changing my mind about it.
I've had some good friends who are ops. Now, as a developer from background, yeah, and I know most developers are like, there's been this constant friction between development side and ops side, and so, hey, developers look at ops as, you're just a thorn in my side. You just put up the hand. You say no. You found all these reasons why we can't do it. That's what DevOps is about, is bringing the two together.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Naturally, we started this whole podcast about DevOps is this hot new word and so forth, but there had to be a reason. Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
For getting into it. So
it was the next natural stage for where real agile teams to go. It's like, all right, we were doing continuous integration, but then it was piling up in a big batch for ops to finally let it go. And how did you break that? The only way you can break that is to bring ops people into an agile mindset.
So I don't know how you feel, Brandon, but I mean, for me, this is more helpful even than that night that we were, at the
free drinks.
Marriott.
More helpful than free drinks.
You are a dum-dum.
But true, it takes me a few times. But I will say, thinking about the ops people from a product perspective as the people that keep your, let's say, current revenue stream alive because they're making sure the lights are on.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And the contention between the people who are trying to innovate, in quotes or whatever, the devs, which we want them to be that way. We want them to do innovative things. We want them to break things. There is, an interesting contention between those two, which you're bringing up, which I never knew that before. And so as a person who may be managing a business, how can you help bridge that gap? And then we're going to get to Nirvana, which we haven't even got to.
We haven't got to
I'm
Nirvana
getting excited about it. I don't know about you. I know that Sassy here in the studio is getting excited about it.
She's trembling.
But how do you bridge the gap to get those two? Because it's almost like business and technology. We always have that issue, right?
Right,
in
right.
an Agile thing. This seems to me like a similar pattern.
Oh, it is. And so that's where, because you're right, Agile brought business and development together. One of the reason to merge the two words, dev and ops, DevOps, it was this, symbol of, hey, they've got to live together. Instead of pulling from two different sides, put the two of them together, DevOps, which everyone, of course, co-opted because they love the term, but even though they have no clue. But that goes back to where we were at the beginning.
Yeah, right.
So if they're in the same team saying, okay, our shared goal is to deliver more value quickly to our end customers, we can share that goal, which is, devs had their own goal of, just push stuff out. Ops had, I want to keep the system stable, so that I can keep it up.
Yeah.
If we together, have this shared goal of releasing more value quickly, that's where we bring them together, and that's what DevOps started with.
And it's kind of interesting to me thinking of kind of the natural progression of this, which is Agile came along and said, let's break things down smaller, let's do full slices, and you can be as agile as you want to be, but then if you don't have CI, you can only go so far. You push up against the wall. And then once you kind of break that barrier of the CI, then it's the two CDs.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Yes.
to a certain extent. And then there was the ops. That was kind of that barrier that all of them felt. It's kind of what I've based on what you were saying now, I really do feel that it's kind of been the barriers that have been broken as we've learned from iterative development, from developing teams that are more agile, that are doing more iterations at smaller cadences. That's the stuff that we're running into. I think it's just a very interesting natural progression of we're kind of continuing to push against the wall.
But I don't know about you, Brandon, but I don't know if this is just based on how you've kind of positioned this, Steve, but the CDs, after we get through automated testing and continuous integration, the CDs versus the ops, the DevOps, I think I don't think people think of it that way. And again, people are just using, like you said, they co-opt the term DevOps, and they mean all of this that you're talking about. We haven't even got to Nirvana yet, by the way.
No, we haven't got there.
But it's really important for us to help companies, clients, whoever, understand the nuances of these things, because I think when they conflate them, they'll fail.
Oh, they do, and that's where. With any given client, I have to probably stop myself, a couple of times when they'll mention the term DevOps one too many times, and I'll go on a rant, and say, all right, are we involving ops? No. All right, then please stop, because what you're talking about is continuous integration. The vast majority of organizations, when they say DevOps, all they're really talking about, and they say, "Oh, I've got my DevOps team." Yeah. It's just setting up continuous integration.
Yeah.
Which is basic table stakes. They need to get beyond to that. But once you involve the ops people, into your team, and you say, "Oh, okay. So what's my perspective? How do I get my stuff, my work into production, and I bring the ops mindset about safety." Now, something you mentioned earlier about, hey, pushing that button. The funny thing is that once the organizations that put that in the hands, they build up this automation for all the way to continuous deployment or even continuous delivery, and say, okay, devs, it's now in your hand. When you submit that code, it's going to go through this testing, this testing, this testing, this testing. If it passes all of that, then guess what? It's going to go live in production. While the devs have been pushing for, oh my God, ops is such a pain. They hold things up. Once the button is in their hands instead of ops, oh my gosh, they get so much more conservative about, hey, wait a minute, let me double check. Am I sure about that?
So then pushing the button, the reality of that, the weight
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us back around, as opposed to being technically nerdy about this stuff, to an agile concept, right? Which is
Right.
everybody has a stake. Everybody has the responsibility for delivery,
Right.
right? And so I think having devs be responsible, not just, and remember back in the old days, it was, well, I'm just gonna just do code, and QA people just like find my shitty code. Sorry,
No, you're good. You're good.
shitty code, and then they'll kick it back to me if it's bad. That was the first battle, which
Yeah.
is no, you're not. You're supposed to deliver good code. Quality is supposed to find edge cases, etc.
Right.
This is kind of an is this an? I'll ask you. Is this an extension of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think Steve, you and I have run into is when you have testers that have done manual work, testing, going back to the CI stuff, they look at it and thinking, oh my gosh, if I do automated, I'm basically working myself out of a job.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's the fear for some companies and for some testers. But oh my gosh, no! I mean, you look at the level and the amount of automated testing, and then you can't just keep adding to your automated test suites. You got to keep refining those, and in essence, grooming those, pulling out the tests that don't. And when I mentioned earlier about scientifically selecting which tests, there is a science to that,
Right.
Around reliability testing, to say, of all of the test cases that I could possibly run, which are the few that are going to give me the most feedback? And there's a science around that, and we have very few organizations leveraging that.
I don't know about you, Brandon, and we haven't even got to Nirvana yet, but
Yeah.
I'm in love with Steve.
Yeah.
He's like, check out the big brain.
Well,
I don't know what to say.
I've had the opportunity to work very closely with Steve with teams and so forth. So, I definitely like him more than I like you.
I don't know if I can handle Nirvana, to be honest. I'm gonna have to leave the room right now
so
before
let's-
we get to Nirvana.
Sure.
Do you want to take a break? before
Yeah, we
finish
definitely
up?
should take a break. Again, any questions or feedback should be sent to, what is it, Greg?
Something at someinformation.com.
Feedback.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Feedback
at
at-
It's a
agileafterdark.com.
tricky one. Why don't you get another maker's mark while people send things to feedback at agileafterdark.com.
The Agile After Dark studios have a lot of Michigan gear in them. I mean, how does that make you feel being an Ohio fan?
Nauseous?
So all I need to tell you, Greg, is just say OH.
I-O.
There you go.
Yeah, I have no idea what that means.
I
but that's
cannot
fine.
believe I
Wait,
participated in that.
wait.
I was trying to
Wait.
have Greg do it.
What do you mean you don't understand what that means? It's only 4 letters. How can you not get it?
Because I just don't pay. I'm from Colorado. We have a lot of letters in our name of our state.
Yeah, no name college.
And we can't understand something with 4 letters. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, so here we are on Agile After Dark. We're talking about all of our favorite subject, which is, the whole DevOps thing. I think we've demystified some of it. I think Steve has actually brought up some fairly controversial issues as it relates to development and operations. And now we are at the point where we are talking about DevOps Nirvana. Now, I never thought I'd say those words together. DevOps and Nirvana together, but I think we're going there, and
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know what it means. I barely am keeping up with what we've learned so far, which is hugely helpful to me as a product guy. But I think I'll let Brandon kind of kick us off, and how do we get to Nirvana?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and working with Steve in the past, there's been a lot of progression in terms of the CI. Let's automate the CD and CD to a certain level of the push button. But after that, when we're talking about the ops and stuff, how they all integrate, let's say that any particular client is, okay, we've figured that all out, we're in a good space. What's the next thing? I know there's cloud services, there's kind of a lot of other things that are kind of coming because of, honestly, technological advances.
Oh,
right?
sure.
But I mean, how realistic? Oh, you say most of some clients are to a point. What if you could just guess, and you don't have your computer in front of you to give me Harry Potter quotes, but like what How many companies do you really think understand or are at the point where they could actually be at Nirvana or be set up to be at Nirvana?
To be at Nirvana, it's very few, because well, you mentioned the cloud services. So you've got you've got this small population that are ready to be cloud, reside on the cloud, have their production servers on the cloud. And that's good, but it's probably a topic for a different podcast because there's a lot of stuff there. As far as the what is the whale thing? Dropper.
Yeah,
No.
Dropper.
No, not Dropper. Oh shit! What's the name of that?
This is a family podcast, Steve. Please refrain from swearing.
It's the whale thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So into looking at those both the tools and the technology to do cloud, but cloud is a huge enabler for both continuous development or continuous deployment and continuous delivery, because that's what enables me to drop as a dev, to have my whole pipeline drop something into either a simulated production environment or into a real production environment quickly. So that's a huge enabler.
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, I've worked with infrastructure and mainframe teams, and literally, if you're asking to do those things that you just talked about, there is a request, whether it be a ticket or anything like that, that you have to go to the people that are literally on site with the mainframes, and they have to put the switch stuff. They literally have to set that stuff up. And the cloud, honestly, can be kind of the playground, if you will, as you said, in terms of, I was going to test this out.
Right. Yeah, and so in a cloud environment, I can, take my new version of software and create a new instance of my production server and deploy it onto that. In fact, I can have that created instance of my production server, set up through various tools like Puppet and Chef, so it's set up just, already, and I can deploy my product to it, and then I can either have it run in a background mode or run it live, whichever, for a certain segment of my population or for the whole thing. So that's a huge enabler for the kind of the shadowing or the load balancing, where I only do a portion of it.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, Steve, but how many companies, let's say financial services, healthcare, who have legacy systems, how many companies have an opportunity to move? And I know the trend, I just know specifically the trend is moving to cloud.
Absolutely.
But we're still going to have companies that are 5 years, 10 years out from getting off of a mainframe. So how do those companies deal with this?
Yeah, the mainframe piece is more challenging, but even there's cloud simulations of mainframes out there. So it's not actually, it's more to do with their willingness to move that direction, and saying, do I trust the cloud, and so on. Again, different podcast, because yeah, there's a lot of stuff around should I move to the cloud and whatever, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about ops, right?
Yeah.
In terms of they're literally keeping the place running.
Right.
So how does that change for them in a cloud environment? I'm very curious to get your take on kind of that side of it, because it was very structured.
Oh yeah.
Right? In terms of we have a box, we have a thing, like we know exactly what's on it, we have load balancing, we have all this stuff, security things on it and so forth. Like, kind of how does that correlate to that?
The biggest difference for me was when the cloud folks that I was with, the cloud ops people that I was working with, because I don't have I have very little knowledge of myself. I gained it all from working with ops people. And so that's why earlier, I have such a huge respect for the ops people, for the good ops people. And there's some of them that are just, busy hands on keyboards. That's all true. But there are some ops people that are just out of this world. And those are the ones that you want to pay attention to when you start talking about DevOps. And particularly when we next talk about DevOps Nirvana. Those are the people I'm talking about. But for those people who say, these people have said, What was the question?
Oh, there. Drinking is coming in.
There we go. The two brothers is taking effect. No, it was really more around. You were definitely getting there. You were on the path.
I know.
You were on the
I
path.
lost it.
But it was and I think you were like right across the finish line. You know, you have the brother that's like carrying his other brother across the finish line of the marathon, which is.
Are they in a three-legged race?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's more of, from the ops people's perspective, what does this whole cloud services?
Yes. For me, the biggest thing that they enlightened me on was they said, hey, you have to recognize that regular ops people view servers, hardware servers, as pets. They're pets. They have to be taken care of.
That's really interesting, and I totally
weird.
Now that he says that, I
freaks me out.
totally understand.
You have to
that.
take care of them. You have to groom them. You have to pet and coddle them because they're a precious. You need to keep them alive.
So the servers for Agile After Dark is definitely named Sassafras.
Well, I was going to say I didn't know we were going to go this after dark.
Right. So, servers in a hardware physical environment, they're pets. You have to, they have names. Think about it. How many servers they have names. You take care of them. You have to, if they're sick, you fix them. You get them better.
What do you mean if they're sick? It's a machine.
Exactly. Something goes wrong or something like that. Whereas they told me, the ops people, and I love this analogy, is they said, hey, in a cloud environment, if it gets sick, it's cattle. You never name it and you shoot it. If it's sick, you shoot it. You just kill it and make another one.
Okay, by the way, Sassafras is not a server. She's really here.
Yeah, no.
Right.
No. We shoot cloud services and make them into glue.
Right. So you shoot cattle when they're sick, but pets you care and you coddle. Sassafras, you're going to care. If she gets sick, you're going to care and you're going to coddle. If you've got cattle out there,
like cattle 62 point whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, totally divergent. A friend of my son. They live out in Montana, and they raised a cow each year, which they harvested. So they told me, the cow last year, and I think it was in 2013. That Skylar told me, hey, last year's cow was named Steve. So we're eating Steve this year. It's like, all right, that's kind of freaky to me.
Harvested means hamburger.
Right. And they're from Idaho, and they were comfortable with, we name it and we're eating it. Right. But most people are not comfortable with eating their pets.
Okay, and so we know.
Or their parents.
Now we know about ops people. We now know how they're wired.
So, I mean, here this is really hard for me to bring it back after. Okay. After one of our amazing co-hosts here is being eaten by other people, but I mean, I think there's a cloud stuff. I think there's also the containers and microservices.
Docker,
right?
That's the one.
Yeah, Docker.
It was Docker.
Docker. Yeah, we were getting it right. I mean,
microservices are interesting because
it's another keyword. This is what another thing. Agile After Dark.
That's another podcast.
Everyone throws out microservices.
They do.
And I was like, what does that really mean? I'm actually curious to hear.
No. So from like a product perspective, I would say microservices sounds great because it sounds to me micro means less money. And it seems to me
it has nothing to do with less money.
But to me, when you say, microservice means we're going to break stuff up in small pieces.
That's why they named
small pieces.
That's why they named it that.
Right. Yeah. But really, I have a feeling that's not really the case, microservices.
No, it is. They named it because they break it into very small pieces. Each one.
Okay, so less money.
No. Because each one delivers a small piece of the functionality, but you need them all to work together.
Okay, so now I have more of a problem.
No.
Steve, I've got more of a problem. I used to have one thing, and now I have 15 things, and they all have to work together, and I got to test them all. Like, what? That's
you already had 15 things. Yeah. When you have any sort of large scale, if you have more than one product, if you're a large corporation, you already had not just 15 things, you had 1,500 things. but they were bundled into 500 applications, and they were all intermixed. And so your integration problems were huge. But this is a different podcast.
Well, no, I agree with you. I think that can be another podcast, but from the annoying product side of the world, I think it is an interesting question.
Always looking for cheaper. Always looking for less money.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right. Well, because they have a budget and they have to, even after he was talking to me about roadmaps, and like
from
18
a dev,
months and
from
blah,
a dev
blah, blah,
and
blah.
ops perspective, just being jerks.
Yeah.
We don't understand those people.
Yeah, but I mean,
hey, by
really,
the way, we pay you. Okay,
yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, but I think that the interesting side of that is, as you break up things, I think the cloud, we were talking about microservices and stuff like that, which is, it's similar to when we're working with teams that they have a certain agile mindset or a CD, CI mindset, right. And we bring them in and we work with them as coaches and we say, we need to switch your mindset a little bit. I would say the same thing for the product side of the fence, which is, you are looking at an overall budget, overall roadmap, ideally a roadmap at least, right? But if you're looking at a budget for what you're going to try and accomplish, if you break it up into smaller bits like we do for iterations, if we do for things in terms of, we really are investing in CI. We're investing in the 2 CDs, and we actually we understand the ops things, which is what Steve very clearly articulated, which I really appreciated, that the product side of the fence understands that if we make these progressions in that versus, we have these releases on top of these releases on top of these releases on top of these releases, and we're actually not building any efficiencies, anything that we're doing as we are standing right now, that is the ROI.
Well, so here's so I don't think we got to Nirvana, but no. I'm not convinced in your argument because I could care less. I just need to get something done in a time period that it's supposed to be done, and I could care less about CD, CI, CC, blah, blah, blah. I could care about all of this stuff because all I want is it to be done, and I want to know if something's going to go wrong earlier rather than later.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's you're playing the devil's advocate, product manager. I appreciate that.
Or an executive.
It's or not just, executive, not just or you're playing,
They don't care. They just want it done.
It's the EVP. Mm-hmm. The executive VP of being a dick. So.
But seriously, that's what you're up against.
Well,
and all the complexity of this whole podcast boils down to the one guy who signs the check.
Yeah.
And until you can help them understand what Steve articulated very well, right. You will never get an understanding and the money to fund something.
And that's where the executive, they are actually going to love where we're going with the Nirvana. Because the Nirvana state, now the challenge here is that I don't need busy hands ops people. I need dev people. I need people with dev skills in order to get to my Nirvana state. But the Nirvana state is that... because the beauty about dev people, one of the things that in a DevOps, when they have their conferences, they've recognized the value of devs is that they're lazy, that they don't,
stuff,
they want to automate crap, and so, an ops person, instead of just in the telecom world, we'd have in the telecom ops world, particularly, they have these literal caves with these huge screens of just flashing, alerts and alarms and whatever is going on. Oh my God, how mind numbing. But a dev person, you put them into that environment and they're like, all right, how the hell do I get out of this? Which is, the answer is I automate it. I'm looking for which patterns are essential. And so that's the key to the Nirvana state, is you bring a development skill into an ops world to say, how do I automate and figure out what are the patterns that I look for that recognize my system's broke?
Yeah, and I actually have a team that I'm working on right now.
Cool.
They are a Kanban team. And they do a lot of service work, but they also do some story work. And they're an infrastructure team. So they're kind of in the middle. They're not mainframe. They're not development. They're kind of in the middle.
But they're close to ops.
They're pretty damn close to ops, right? Yeah. And they had a really difficult time understand. They have like one guy that does scripts. Right?
Oh, they need several. They need multiple.
He does shell scripts, right?
Nerd alert.
And we've worked with that team to have a lot of other people take over that, but we had them say and agree to that as part of their Kanban board in terms of the ready, their Kanban backlog, is that they will, as they're working on their work, they will identify places where they would say, you know what, some scripts would help with this.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. That's the right mentality to have, to say, what is it that I need to do? And so when you start to talk to the real ops people, the people who have to be up 24/7 or who get the weekend calls that say, hey, I don't want you to put this into production because you're not ready to take the call. Those people who say, okay, let me look at the patterns. Yeah. What are the signals that tell you when the system and the early indicators? So, it's easy to find the failure points, but the craft of it is to say, okay, what's the early sign that the system's about to crash? Yeah. Okay, this page count goes high, this memory count. What are those indicators on the servers so that we can tell before the customer ever makes a phone call that, hey, our server, our system is about to suffer a catastrophic failure. That's what Nirvana state is. You're constantly monitoring. It's an automation of the monitoring, and it's close to AI. Yeah. They don't ever call it AI, but having a master's in computer science and studying AI, it's pretty close to AI stuff because it's the pattern matching of what is a good operational system look like from all of its operational, you look at Splunk and all of its feeds and these different monitoring things. How do you predict when a system is going to go south?
Yeah.
Okay. Wait a second.
Well,
I can't. My head's going to explode right now. I can't even deal.
Well, I was going to say,
this is
I had an unbelievable tech coach that was working with me on that team.
Oh my God! I tried to stop it, audience. I tried to stop it.
No, but he basically said, as we were at the beginning with this team that I was just describing, and they were saying, well, we have this drive where we have these scripts. Yeah. And we copy the scripts and we do that. And but otherwise, I'm basically going on to the servers to make sure, literally going on to the servers.
Right.
To make sure what has been installed is working. Yeah. And my tech coach, he felt bad about it afterwards. I thought it was amazing. He's like, you cannot right click your way through life. Yes. That is not an option. That is not where the world is going. So when we talk about the Nirvana stuff, the right clicking your way through your work, that is not the way that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't even know. I lost track when we were talking about cucumber or whatever you were talking about. So, and the cat
cucumber is a thing. By the way. He actually never mentioned cucumber, but it is a thing.
It is.
But here the cat ran out of the room, and that means time to go.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank Steve. I really appreciate your time walking Greg through all of this. I think he got a lot out of it, and I hope everyone else did as well. But thank you again, Steve.
It was fun. It was a blast.
Yeah, and I think we have some good follow-ups for future podcasts.
And I mean, what do you think about this? The Agile After Dark studio. Pretty luxurious, don't you think?
Well, except for the Michigan gear. The Michigan gear is a downer, but the rest of it is okay. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're going to deal with that over time.
Well, we'll take some shots at the Ohio State shot glasses, and we'll be all good. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us for this podcast. It's been a lot of fun. Again, if you have any feedback or questions, please send it to feedback@agileafterdark.com.
What was that again?
Yeah, it's feedback@
something.com.
Yeah, it's agileafterdark.com. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
close enough to the mic, Brandon? Just to make sure.
Jesus
Kiss
Christ,
it.
dude. Well, if you're looking at you know what it really
Maybe
is.
intimate to
You know, it
the
really
mic.
is. I'm just like jealous that he's looking at you more than he's looking at me.
That's not the problem.